Good evening and welcome to the HUUSD School Board meeting for December 3rd, 2025. It is starting at 6:08. We're sorry for the late start. Turn Cindy's volume down. We have had a few mishaps on the road out in front of Harwood, but everything's okay. All right, we're going to call the meeting to order. Is there anyone here for public comment?
And you know the audience.
Oh, yeah.
I see the fact we need to promote. It's called Curtis. Listed as Stephanie. Oh, there we go. I got it now. Ask if anyone makes ordering.
Right. Does anyone have any public comment who's in Zoom? Hi, Cam and Dave. We are welcoming the team from Truex Collins to speak with us this evening, and they are also in Zoom. Okay. Okay. The first thing we need to do is approve the agenda. Does someone feel like making that motion? All right. Cindy moves and Emily seconds. And all those in favor? Aye. Okay, agenda approved. I didn't ask the students for a report, but do you have any? All right, we're going to hear from the students. Okay, thank you. Curtis, I need. How about? Dave Epstein, can you hear me? Okay, that's better. Thank you. All right, students, let's hear from you guys.
Well, you can just stay on that slide if you want. So this is the student report for December 3rd, 2025. We've got a couple things happening in the building right now. First thing is the sophomores tree sale is coming up soon. These happen every year, and the money that is raised from it will both be used to fund the prom next year, and then any leftover money will be what they use towards their senior gift. Hold on, I can get up the times. The tree sale will be happening from 5 to 7 p.m. on the Friday, which is the 5th, and then on Saturday and Sunday, the 6th and the 7th, it will be from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Yes, it is at LaRoe Farm, I do believe. So if you need a tree and you feel like supporting Harwood students, pop on over to LaRoe Farm. Who's next?
So winter sports are kicking off. Basketball had their tryouts on Monday and are in the gym currently having practice. Cross country Nordic skiing is in full swing. They were outside this evening in the cold. And hockey, the boys team has their first game next Saturday and their first scrimmage this Saturday, both at home. And the girls, I do believe, are also next Saturday. First game. We also just had our semi-annual blood drive, which happened on November 18th. We had a goal of 32 donors and we had a total of 49 donors and we got 37 pints collected with a bunch of Powerades and we got a lot of volunteering hours from that experience.
The salad bar has returned. And that concludes our report.
A little bit more about the salad bar. It has been gone for about a year, and the effects of it not being there has definitely been felt with the lunch line being incredibly long. With the salad bar now back, we are hoping that it will make the line feel shorter. It's only been back a day. Today was the first day, but it definitely might just be me imagining things and hoping for it to be good, but it definitely did feel like a shorter wait to get lunch today. And yeah, and we're hearing the salad bar was good. If anybody has any questions about stuff we talked about, anything else that might be happening in the building.
Any questions for the students? Thanks, guys. That's great to hear about the salad bar. Oh, hey, how's the food shelf? Is it low? Does it need any donations?
We're doing pretty well.
Okay.
We have a great abundance of mac and cheese, which has been the most popular item there probably. But we could use like more snacky food. But I think we're doing pretty well right now. We're in the process of applying for a HUUSD grant that we're pretty much guaranteed to win if no one applies from Vermont, like what happened last year. So that'll be a great boost.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yes. Shaw
Oh.
food. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. We're going to skip over Mike for a moment because he is on the phone with AAA. So we're going to move on. We have the Truex boys are here to talk with us about building use and visioning, and JB is going to lead that off. You want? Welcome, Karen Dave.
Is this thing on? There we go. Yeah, so the Building Use and Visioning Committee met last on November 20th. We had Dave and Cam there. Just basically taking a look at some high-level observations and potential next steps based on some updated cost modeling summary after the facility assessment. I'll let Dave and Cam provide their insights, but high-level look is that the savings with the updated facility assessments, our savings are greater than the original calculation we've seen, and that they're all a lot more tightly grouped. Not a big difference between the various planning options. So we did finally have we have two new members with Pam and Langford, which was great. So it's nice to have some fresh faces on the team. Yeah, I think there's a presentation that is linked to the agenda that has, again, a few high-level overview based on the facility assessment report and the updated cost modeling summary. I guess I would defer the rest to Dave and Kim.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name's Dave Epstein. I'm with Truex Collins, and with me is Cam Featherstonhoff, who's also with Truex, and together we've worked with the district for several years, and more recently on master planning for the district. And we're going to provide a short update, and I'm going to share my screen so that we can all look at the slide together. So this is this is the same presentation with a few tweaks from what you have in your packet. On the left, you have the cost modeling that we did before the facility evaluations, and then on the right is the cost modeling we did after we had the data from the facility evaluations. And Cam's going to talk a little bit about what the differences are between the two in terms of the data that we had.
Thanks, David. So in a nutshell, on the left is what the cost model returned based on information we had prior to the facility evaluations. When we did that, we used 4% of current replacement value, which is a recommended budget for schools needing to do capital renewal from the Association of Physical Plant Administrators. So it's kind of a reasonable placeholder. In doing the facility evaluations, we got new information, which was that the amount of work that's out there, kind of deferred maintenance and end of life and other opportunities, energy efficiency and stuff, is considerably less than that recommendation. And that had when that new data was put into the cost model, it did two things. It shows greater savings over time because savings over time is relative to the status quo, which does still require you to continue budgeting on an annual basis. All of the other options, including the status quo with the bond, everything that returns a savings is reliant on a bond to do the work that's in front of you. But the other thing that happened is because the cost of just taking care of the buildings you have went down, it more tightly grouped the savings from option to option. So there's not a huge difference between kind of keeping things as they are in terms of your buildings and cohorts and reconfiguring the district.
So to summarize, the overall savings appear to be greater if you bond versus budgeting, but the options are tightly grouped. And one of the reasons we believe is because the existing schools are currently close to capacity. So in every option where we looked at a reconfiguration, there was significant investment in terms of additions to the facilities, which was eating up some of the savings. In other districts that we've worked in where the buildings were very much under capacity and we were able to through reconfiguration, fill those buildings, there was a greater difference between the different options. Now, having said all that, there may be other advantages in the reconfiguration options that don't show up in terms of the financial modeling, such as educational, social, staffing, in terms of retention and things like that. But so this is really just we're updating just the financial aspect of the master plan. In terms of future funding, there is no school construction aid program. There was in Act 73, which was the big transformation act. There is a school construction aid program in that law, but it's really just the framework. It's not funded, and the policy that are embedded in it are not fully fleshed out. So we don't know whether the status quo or any of the reconfiguration options are consistent with state policy because there really is no state policy yet. And we generally know the direction they want to go in, which is regional high schools, standalone middle schools, and they make a distinction between schools that are small by necessity or small by preference. And I think though one of the key things is that in any future school construction aid scenario, they're going to ask for a master plan. That's already in Act 149. It's embedded in Act 73, and you folks are doing that work. We're doing that work right now, and being able to go and say, look, we've looked at reconfiguration options. It doesn't. There isn't a big savings in going in any of the directions. Bolsters your case. For retaining your schools if that's so desired. Despite all that, we've, it, and not even despite, because of that, it would seem that updating the district facilities is a sound investment, because for the reasons I was just stating, which is that the cost modeling demonstrates that district reconfiguration doesn't result in significant savings. So I think you can feel confident, and especially in terms of Harwood and the middle schools, that those projects are sound investments, as they would be for all of the schools. But in terms of what the state may or may not support, certainly the high school isn't going anywhere and would warrant, and also represents the lion's share of the deferred maintenance costs. So we're going to go to the next slide. Cam, do you want to talk about the first bullet? Right, you're muted.
Oh, it wouldn't be a post-pandemic meeting without errant unmuting. So in terms of next steps, there are some different strategies that can be employed to sort of break down the kind of overwhelming large numbers that we've uncovered. And part of it is, at a minimum, identifying the critical projects that will keep the buildings open, heated, and dry. And that's an important first step. Identifying important projects that allow each facility to function adequately. Deciding whether climate and climate-based design is an integral part of this approach. Discussing whether to upgrade whole areas of a building or entire systems, or a combination of the two, as opposed to just trying to do it all at once, which can be very expensive. And you can work with an architect to develop a design approach, a scope of work, and cost for each significant project.
And I think that bullet I added because I want, in terms of our original proposal, the next step was to proceed with concept design, because the numbers we're dealing with were done as part of the facility evaluation. Typically, you'll bundle projects together. So if you're doing HVAC, it often includes, you're going to do lighting and ceilings at the same time, and putting together those scopes of work and getting updated pricing based on that more detailed information, I think is an important part of budgeting and creating a capital investment plan, which is the next bullet. So, a capital investment plan typically is you can pick a time frame. It can be 10 years, it can be 20 years. And you say, okay, here's what we're going to do in the first 5 years. Here's what we're going to do in the next 5 years. And some of it you might say, well, we can budget for this, and we can, but this is what we need to bond for. So it becomes not everything will go in a capital investment plan. Some things you might decide are too big to budget for on a yearly basis. And finally, if you do decide to bond, thinking about strategies for bonding. For example, should there be one large bond, and you try and tackle everything, or do you do a bond every 5 years or every 10 years? And within that strategy, should it include work at all schools or just targeted ones? And a lot of these bullets, just so you know, we tried to summarize the conversation we had with the facilities committee, so you'd have the benefit of that meeting. And one of the things we talked about was, the idea of talking with other school districts. Colchester just passed a large bond. Champlain Valley, they do bonds every couple of years, 8 to 10 million kind of approach. They take a very different approach. They haven't done a one massive bond in a long time. And then obviously Burlington School District passed a very large bond, as did Winooski a few years ago. So, talking with those districts, finding out what their experiences were like and what worked for them, what didn't work, we thought was an important bullet point to add. And that concludes the presentation right now. as I said, we wanted to capture some of the points that came up during the facilities meeting, and that's why we've added this third slide. So at this point, we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Dan?
Can you hear me through the mask? Okay. Um, I have one, I guess, challenge and one question. Um, the challenge is that you concluded that the different options don't have significant savings, which, unless I'm reading it wrong, I guess I disagree with. One of the options shows about a $3.3 million per year savings, which to me is significant. And I think in about an hour, when Lisa does her presentation, we're going to see what $3.3 million might do. So I guess I don't necessarily agree with that conclusion. We want to hit any comments on that before I go to the question, or? And then
I
my,
think I think what we meant was that there is the savings among the options, which include doing something and not just continuing as you were. They're all tightly grouped, so there's not significant long-term savings relative to one option over the other. I think we weren't speaking about the annual budget.
Yeah, and I think if you look at like option 0 versus option G1, I mean, that's $100 million. That's not nothing. But, you know, in other districts, when we've done this, there's usually a very wide spread between the different options, and here they're more tightly grouped is really the point we wanted to make. And what was your question?
okay, the question, and I've asked this a few times, and maybe it's just a hurdle that I'm not getting over. And there's a lot of educators in the room, so maybe somebody can explain it to me. But in the last 20 years, we've lost almost 500 students from this district. In the last 2 years, almost 50 staff. And in the next 3 years, we're projecting another 45, 50 students and probably more staff. So that's like 600 humans that have left our system in the last 20 years. But I keep hearing that our buildings are at capacity. And I'm wondering how that math works. Like, how can we be at capacity when only 20 years ago we had 600 more people in our buildings?
You know, the answer I would offer is that this partially needs to be answered by some of the educators in the room, but our experience as architects programmatically in terms of space use is that there are a lot of services being provided in schools that were not present 15, 20 years ago, including things like occupational therapy and physical therapy, speech language pathology, academic intervention, coaching, and the list goes on and on. And those uses are space intensive. And if you take a look through, if you walk through schools in Vermont, you will find a number of them have classrooms which have been converted into makeshift spaces for special education services, or offices for people who are doing reports or evaluations, etc. So it's not that the buildings have a functionally different capacity in their classrooms. It's that some of those classrooms are no longer classrooms. They're being used for other things. And I think the buildings, to be clear, are not at capacity, but they're not so empty that you can just take all the students out of one and move them into another one. And you know, there's more behind the statement than that, but essentially that's it. You know, they're probably at average 75 or 80% capacity, which is probably where you want your schools to be in anyway. So I don't know if any educators have anything to add to that, but that's
Mike,
from where
I think Mike has something to say.
I think one of the things that the committee looked at and explored is, different configurations. And, technically, is there space in some buildings? Yes. It would require configuration in different ways that this district has not looked at before. The example, I was just at Brookside this morning. So the board knows that over the last 2 years, we've gone from four per classroom to four classes per grade to three per grade, from kindergarten to fourth grade. Now, some of those classrooms have been used up by other means. So our Rivers program was in an inadequate space before. They are in what used to be a kindergarten space. So we have reconfigured some classes, but are there places that could be used? Yes. But to Cam and David's point, we had an issue last year that Lisa could talk about in more detail, where we had the fire marshal come through who cited, who said that we are using spaces for, speech and language pathologists. They were upstairs in the middle of a hallway and said, you really can't use that for an instructional space. So some of our buildings were using spaces that weren't intended for those purposes. So they've been able to shift and make some changes to classrooms. So could the board look at some reconfiguration options that would shift beyond the traditional town lines as well? Yes. But it would take some more work on the part of taking a look at options, taking a look with the visioning and building a use committee of what do you specifically want to look at, and then what's the programmatic input. So to your point, yes, there are spaces. It's not the traditional sense just because of those services that David has pointed out. So the answer is complicated. Some in their experience and in my experience talking to superintendents throughout the state, there are some buildings where half the building is not being used anymore. That's not the case in any of our buildings. So yes, with a little asterisk next to it.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Ashley. I just wanted to mention how this information, kind of going hand in hand with the mega consolidation plan that they've floated, and then even our own consolidation, it just makes that whole pie in the sky idea of saving money even more ridiculous to me, because again, these spaces aren't going to just disappear when we close three schools. We're going to need all those spaces moved with the schools that close. So when we look at the whole idea of consolidation, I hope we'll put this in that pie plate as well as a real warning sign to alert us that this is not a money-saving gambit. That's all.
Steve Rosenberg.
I have a comment and a couple questions. So first, I agree with the point Jonathan brought up. I think that's a good point. The second comment is when we first engaged Truex Collins, there was some pushback in the community that we were spending a lot of money to see how we could close schools and disrupt kids' education. But with this report, that kind of the numbers lean against school consolidation, and the fact that we're going to need some sort of strategic plan to present to the state, and that we have a very firm basis of that report here, I really feel like Truex Collins has earned every penny we've paid them. I think it's really been very beneficial. Okay, then I do have a couple quick questions. So I should know the answer to this, but I don't. In these options, are construction costs included or reconfigurations?
Yes, they are.
Thanks. And the second question maybe is more for Lisa. If we go a bond route, the bond money counts against the per pupil expenditure, right? And say we float a bond for 20 million. What does that do to per pupil expenditure? Do you know by how much? Right. But I mean, since we have this problem of running into that threshold, would be nice to get some numbers for 10 million, 20 million, just some ballpark figures. Thank you.
And I would say as the board has known for years, and even when Lisa and I came in, we were told that we were up against that threshold, and we're seriously close. And I won't steal any of Lisa's thunder, but we are teetering on that verge. As we sit here, very strongly teetering. Yeah.
Emily?
So I just want to, I guess, comment and sort of back up some of the thoughts that Dan had with thinking about that the schools are at capacity, but then we're talking about a lowering of student enrollment. So I just want to say I think it's very beneficial and to hear of the other things that our classrooms and our school spaces are being used for. And I think this goes back to another area that I feel very passionate about is making sure that the public understands this, because I made one of my first notes when I went through this presentation was spending money on expansions because we're running out of space, but we have lower enrollment, right? And so it just sort of seems like a little bit of a backwards way of thinking. But when you get a better understanding of what is happening within these walls, I think that just goes to some of the challenges that we're also going to be up against when we're talking about budgets and bonds, just the constant struggle of how to get this information out there so that people understand what's behind these numbers and these recommendations.
Any more questions for Cam or Dave? All right. Well, thank you, you guys. We really appreciate it. It's a lot of food for thought, and it's certainly part of the big puzzle we're working on right now. And I'm sure we'll be back in touch.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thanks.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Want to finish up on anything with that? Or all right, so that's kind of where we're at with that as we move forward into the next part of this discussion. All right. Next, we've dedicated 90 minutes to talking about the budget, and Lisa is here to present to us on the options that we've asked for. And we're gonna, oh, sorry, go ahead, Charlotte. No.
I had a question about an email that was sent out yesterday. I was a little confused. For Dr. Mike, this is a question for you. The possibility for opening later and ending earlier next year. Like, what is that? I was just kind of like where that came from. And
Yeah, well, we talked. I talked about that in my report, I think, last month. But most schools in the region, most schools in the state, and I'm looking to Shannon because she did a lot of the research, have early release for professional development. My last school district had that as well. That has not been the case here. We are looking at that for professional development for teachers, and the survey gives both options: early release or late start, because different schools have done that in different ways. I'm trying to remember the school district that we learned that just switched to, was it Champlain? I think it was South Burlington, shifted to kind of a morning late start, once every month, once every other month on a periodic basis for teachers. The other reason we're talking about this, number one, for professional development, but there's also a lot of after school meetings as well that take place currently that are after school hours. So we pay stipends. So we're also looking for some ways to build in time for some of those professional meetings that have to take place. So it's something that we're exploring potentially for next year. And the survey was to get community input on what are things we should consider, what shouldn't we look at, what should we look at, what are some potential challenges.
And then Jonathan.
Would this mean that there would be less calendar days taken away from the school year for the professional development days? So right now, I think last week, Monday was a professional development day, and then the rest of the week was holiday. So would that play into that and therefore potentially school ending, a couple days earlier in June, barring, snow days.
So not necessarily, for example, last Monday it was coded as a professional development day, but teachers for parent conferences work sometimes several evenings over the course of a week that comprises about a day. So that Monday was a day that is a compensation for those evening hours for conferences. So there would still be professional development. The teachers have a certain number of days. Most of them we have been able to do before school, but there are some embedded professional development days generally targeted to a specific topic. So they would be in addition to the days that are already part of the teacher contract. And that's very typical. It's like I said, it's not been a practice here, but it's very common school districts throughout the country.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Mike, on that same topic, it seems to me that the big problem that parents at least would have with this idea is what now to do with work and what to do with the child that isn't in school if the parents have to work and can't adjust their schedule. There's certainly a lot of people that are, demanded to be at work for that 40 hours. And if they can't be, then it's a problem not only for their budget, but also potentially for their livelihood, and that they might be looked down upon for not being available. That being said, I didn't hear or see anything about alternatives for those kids. Can we just find a way to offer after school or before school being open for those kids that don't have an option, so that families aren't having to threaten their livelihoods and or budgets by having to be home to take care of their kids that extra time a month for the time the kids? That's a lot of days for people that are already on a razor's edge and might not have the flexibility that it would be ideal for this idea. And I'm not against the idea, but I think that we should make some kind of arrangements, whatever. I don't know what they would be, but I think we should not plan to go forward with this plan without an arrangement for kids to have a place to be in the case that a family can't manage those odd hours, scheduled odd hours, in addition to vacations and snow days and other planned absences. And I just hope that there's something we'll do to make that easier on families.
Yeah, good point. And that's one of the reasons that we wanted to do the survey, to see what some of the feedback was, that we're in conversation with some community groups about how this could be assisted through different programs that are existing. And then the other piece too that we wanted to look at and get feedback is if we're making a change for next year, we want to do it soon so that people have predictability and the ability to build that in their schedule. And that's what we heard from colleagues around the state who've done this, and that was my own experience, that once you introduce the concept and have predictable schedule that's built in advance, then we can help facilitate some of those childcare needs, and then it gives families predictability and planning. But thank you. That was one of our goals, and one of the pieces that we're looking at as we're starting to go through the survey. And I think Shannon and I briefly looked at it today, and I think we had 178. Does that sound right? It was quite a few people who reached out. 188 as of now.
JB and then Rebecca.
He is allowing me to go first because he thinks my question's probably better. So for the surveys for redistricting, we got over 700, right? So I'm curious to know what your expectation is for the survey for this, and how many respondents are going to be good enough to make a decision, because the people who are the most taxed probably aren't filling out your survey.
Well, I would make a distinction. The redistricting survey the board put out was to the whole community. So that went to 14,000 people as opposed to, we're just really targeting internal people, family. And generally, if you get generally surveys, and when I've done doctoral dissertation chairs with students, you look for 5%. So if you get a 5% turnout, that's generally considered in the statistical realm a good percentage. So with 178, if we think just we have 1,700 students, 1,700 maybe less family. That's a pretty, for our surveys, that's been a pretty good turnout. Would you agree, Shannon?
Sorry, the survey is open until the early release or late start survey is open until next Friday. And a reminder is going to go out on Monday in the district bulletin.
E and then Lang.
Back to Truex for a minute. So if Lang's questions pertains to this, and
It's my understanding that currently there's 8 professional days as it stands right now, and this proposal would make it 9 professional days, but they'd only be half day. That's what the proposal says.
So the professional days are full professional days that are part of the contract. This would be an early release, so a couple of hours, not a full half day.
So would this make it 17 total, or would we lose some of those 8? The 8s are full days, right?
Right. They are full days, and that's unrelated to the early release. Early release is just, they are contractual days. The teachers are obligated to be here in addition to the 178 student days for their full contract. So it's kind of like an apples and oranges. The early release days are generally, or professional development early release days are in addition to that. They're not full days. They're partial days. I can't remember what our plan was for the hours, the number of hours. Yeah.
Okay, because proposal says the district currently has 8 professional development days per year, and then it says that's the current, and this is proposal once a month, which is 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, as a parent of 2 elementary school kids who go to aftercare, I assume my aftercare would take the kids at that earlier stage coming off the bus. So this would be a much less impact on my professional life if we did half days rather than these full days, because full days, there's no care.
Mm-hmm.
Like one parent has to be home with the kids all day. That's what I generally have to do. But to have the opportunity to still get the professional development for the teachers, and then maybe I have to pay a little bit more for that aftercare, which is relatively affordable. This would be a much less impact for me. And I feel like other people, to some people's points,
Mm-hmm.
that have to be at work. So now I'm kind of confused. Are there going to be still those days where there's no school whatsoever for professional, or no?
There would be, and most of those days that you're talking about are done before the school year starts.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
So our district opening day, and you weren't on the board yet, but we have a district opening day. That's a full day of professional development. We generally have 3+ days before the school starts. We have a couple of days embedded in the year, including that vacation last week, Monday last week. So they are all, if you pull up kind of the overview calendar that's on the district website, you can kind of see where we have them spaced, particularly the ones before the school year. And we have had some ones after the school year as well. But good point. Thank you very much.
so I guess I did have something to say after Dave and Cam left. I think I would like the board, it doesn't have to be tonight, but I think we need to think about the direction this committee wants to go in, and whether, we have a strong body of work. We have some updated numbers that for the most part show little savings in various planning options, so long as we pass some sort of bond. And I guess it doesn't have to be tonight, but I think at some point in a future meeting, y'all could think about it and kind of let us know what direction you want this committee to go, what it's going to do next. Do we still want to look at these various planning options? Do we want to wait until budget season's over and see? I'm afraid what it's going to look like then. We might be in a place where people are clamoring for school closure or various consolidation efforts, and we're still going to have this body of work in front of us. So there's going to be a lot of tough decisions ahead, I think, with the budget. So I don't think we need to get so deep in the weeds of of this work until after budget season. But I just like people to start thinking about where they like this committee to go and what we're going to do as far as planning for the future.
I think that's a great idea because the last thing we'd want is the expense for this to be kind of shelved and not revisited again for a while. So can we put that in the agenda in like April? Let me just make sure that this is in June, in July when we're all off, perhaps. Whatever month seems.
I do think, we talked about at our last committee meeting, this is great data. It's not just going to be shelved. Even if we don't pursue any of these planning options and any sort of consolidation effort, we still have this body of work to go on as far as capital improvement and working with Ray. Maybe it's 3 bonds. I don't see one giant bond being a great idea or getting too much support out in the community, but maybe it's various bonds, as Dave alluded to. So I don't think it will be shelved, but I would like to know whether we're still going to be pursuing some of these options or what else the committee's work might shift toward.
We will put it on a future agenda. We can confer once we get through the budget, the bulk of budget season, when that's going to be. Okay. If no one has any, Bobby, go ahead. And then we're going to move on to Lisa.
This is thinking about what you just said, JB, and wondering if your committee has any, could come together with some thoughts or to bring back to us.
The queen herself, the queen of the finances, Lisa, take it away.
Testing. Okay. While she's pulling that up, we got our December 1st letter. Little grim. I'm not sure if everybody had a chance to look at it or read it. So before I start talking about the December 1st letter, I want to, while Cindy's popping this up, I want to talk about the budget scenarios, remind everybody what the 4 scenarios were. First scenario was level service, and level service is basically maintaining programs, staffing, overall current programs academically without any major adjustments, plus or minus, no new initiatives. However, there could be adjustments based on enrollment or educational or operational factors. If you recall, Waitsfield, we didn't have the enrollments for pre-K, so we reduced that. So there's level services basically maintaining what you have with some tweaks. There's no new initiatives added. Second scenario was align costs of living adjustment, which is the COLA, which currently is predicted for fiscal year 27, for fiscal year 26 is 2.8. So I'm basing it on 2.8% for fiscal year 26, which would be half of the year. And then not to exceed the excess spending threshold. And I want to remind everybody what the excess spending threshold is $16,000 470. And for every dollar we go over that excess spending threshold, we're taxed $2.
If you have this really quick, what percent increase would put us above the excess spending threshold? I should have assumed you would. I'm sorry.
Adding to the, I got to work you all up to this. And then level funded. And level funded is our current budget, which is $49.2 million. Next slide. So if you recall, 2 years ago, our LTW ADM, we had it initially came out and we were at version 5 by the time we finally got the numbers. Right now, we've got the initial version 1, and I am not happy with the numbers whatsoever. Our numbers are low. I'm questioning a lot of the numbers. Mike and I keep pushing back. The numbers are not accurate. So we're hoping that by version 5 or 6, they will be accurate, but right now, based on what I know today, I have to use this number. But I know, for instance, our English language learners numbers is very low. And if you recall, that weight is the heaviest weighted, and it's 2.49. So I'm fighting for every head count. So, and it's about, it's about 12 off, 13 off, depending on average. We average between 17 to 21, and right now it's reported as 10. So there's a lot of numbers in there that we're not comfortable with. So we're going to keep pushing back on that. Sure.
The report just came out on Friday. So it came out, and within about 10 minutes, my phone started dinging with other superintendents in the region. And I know Lisa's did with finance directors. The numbers statewide for the poverty weight, which is based on free and reduced lunch rate, which is based on a survey, which you don't really need to do anymore because of universal meals, they have dropped considerably. That's another one that for us, the numbers are really low. And I'm really trying to question that. Another area that we are pushing the agency on is there's a pre-K weight and there's an EL weight. We should theoretically, because it's not excluded in the statute, we should be getting EL weights for students who are in pre-K. The AOE has not been doing that, and their reasoning is, well, they don't take it. It's a test called the WIDA, which is one of the indicators. However, there are students who we provide services. So there's a lot in this version that when you look at the history from the last 2 years, I think last year was version 5 as well, Lisa. And we are very skeptical on what's being shared with us as of right now.
So just as a point of to point out, we have right now our numbers are a drop of 3% with our LTW ADM. And so I'm hoping by version 5 that tweaks up a little bit. Next slide. So if you recall at the last presentation, that influx of one-time money that came into the educational system, the ed fund, every time we do that, it puts a bump in the road. So we have to make up that $118 million, and we don't have that. So we're looking at a 12% increase in the December tax letters, what's projected. So again, anytime, and that's why I've always cautioned us not to have any carryover. We put it into our maintenance reserve, because one time you put that one-time reserve or carry forward into your budget the next year, then you have a problem. You have to make up that money. So next slide. I just want to remind everybody we're still very early in the process. This is a slide that I had presented in one of my other presentations, but we are only on tile 2, and we just got the letter. We are still very early on in terms of numbers and projections. I'm still working on trying to sharpen our pencil and see what numbers I can provide, but I can give you at the high level number. So I just wanted to remind everybody where we are in the timeline, and it's still very early. Next slide. So what I wanted to be able to share with you is with the 4 scenarios, this is high level, level service, and remember our current budget is $49.2 million. With a level service budget, we would be looking at, and I'm estimating right now because I'm still very working on numbers, but right now I'm projecting 52.1 million, which is a $2.9 million increase. With that increase, we would, based on the numbers I have today, based on the yield and based on the long-term LTW ADM, we would be exceeding our threshold. And the threshold is 16,470. And remember, every $1 over, we're taxed too. Not to exceed the threshold, we would need to drop and have only a 4% increase. That would be, the increase would be a $1.9 million increase. However, based on the current numbers I have, it would be almost $1 million deduction, decrease, 974,000. If we were to align to COLA, which is 2.8, it would be an increase year over year of 1.3 million, but a decrease we would have to reduce based on what we have for a level service of $1.5 million. And level funded would be a $2.9 million decrease. Next slide. So just I wanted to remind everybody of the assumptions that I have. What's not highlighted in red is solid numbers. Our dental insurance just came in at 12%. Health insurance is 7.3%. Teachers' average wage increase based on the CBA is 6.5, and the support staff is in negotiation, so that's to be determined. Next slide. And I'm sorry, and the last slide is those other numbers is what I plugged in. If you go back one slide, I'm sorry. What's not, what's red is what I'm seeing. I am projecting our insurance to go up 7.6%, utilities 3%. I'm projecting based on supplies and what I'm seeing in costs and estimates between a 3% and 5%, depending on what it is. What I wanted to be able to share with you is a view of healthcare costs over the last several years, stating starting back from fiscal year 21 through what I'm projecting for fiscal year 27. You can see what budgeted versus actual, and actually in 1 year, in fiscal year 23, we exceeded our budget, and we actually went over because it wasn't budgeted appropriately. I started that year, so I did not do that budget. That's the year I started. So, however, we did, if you'll see, I did go slightly over in our budget in fiscal year 25. But you'll see the year over year increases and what we're seeing and projecting. Remember, we've been seeing double-digit health increases. Where now this is the first time that we're celebrating that we're below a double digit. We're at 7.3%. However, we actually have been 11, 12, 16. So those numbers have been increasing significantly. I also want to remind everybody next slide, I'm sorry. Remind everybody what actually makes up our budget. 72, almost 73% of our budget is salary, wages, and benefits. The other 27% of our budget is operational costs, educational costs. So it's really 27% of our budget is below the line expenses. And that's what we run the school district on. And a lot of those costs are fixed costs. Utilities, there's fixed costs that we just have to pay. Next slide. So in looking at that, and knowing that that 73, almost 73% of our budget is made up of what I consider called above the line salary and wages and benefits, how can we, in looking at the different scenarios, where could we come up with these reductions? So what I thought would be easier and as a good point of view is to see what an average salary costs. So I averaged out what a salary would be for a teacher plus benefits and taxes and what the total would be. And then I also put in what a teacher would be at the first 5 years, an average salary of the teacher first 5 years. Fully loaded is 107. And then an average support staff, that's union and non-union, an average support staff is a total of 62. And I just want to remind, benefits is not just health benefits. It's everything, and I listed it below. It's retirement, HRA, HSA, life insurance, long-term disability. So that's fully loaded. Next slide. I shared this at the last board meeting, what our predicted pressures are right now, and these are the big buckets of increases that I'm seeing in that number that I provided with level service. I'm still working with the administration on this, the administrators, to see where we can tweak this, but right now this is what I'm seeing. Next slide. We can skip this. This is just reminding everybody what the educational threshold is, the extraordinary threshold, and just as a reminder, for anything over the 68,998 in special ed services, we get 95% back above that number. So that number has been creeping up every year. And for years and years and years, it was at 50,000. And every year now it's gone up since I started, and that was only 4 years ago. The year I started, it creeped up. So, and prior to that, it was at 50,000 for many years. Next slide. So there are unknown still. The LTW ADM has still been changing daily. Unfortunately, even with what they posted last week and what they posted today, it's slightly changed, but our numbers have not changed yet. So we're still working with them. The projected yield that they had in the December 1st letter is low. It's 8,849. If you recall, last year's yield was 8,596. The lower the yield, the higher the taxes. The higher the yield, the lower the taxes. And I'm talking pre-CLA. So as a reminder, the yield is not set until the end of the legislature. So we don't really know that number. So we have to work with what I have today at 8,849. As I mentioned before, LTW ADM is down by 3%. With what I have in level service, with every 1% cut, we would be looking at a $521,526 cut for every 1% to the budget. And I just wanted to put out there what an average FTE costs, an average FTE going across the board with all different job categories. Is 99,909. That's fully loaded. Next slide. So in plugging in, I wanted to be able to, just because we have, our salaries and wages and benefits is our big nut. It's 73% of our total budget. How can then we look at this depending on what scenario we want to choose? Right now, I just plugged in using FTEs and using the average 99,909. What would the impact be? So obviously, level funded, we would be looking at reducing an additional 26.5 FTEs over what we've done for the last 2 years, which is not possible. Mike's right. We can't. Aligned with COLA, with a 2.8% increase year over year, we'd be looking at reducing 16 FTEs. And again, remember, I'm only just using FTEs as a demonstration here. I mean, there's obviously some things below the line that we could be looking at as well, which we are. Not to exceed threshold is 4%, is 9.75 FTEs and 10 FTEs. And then the level service is exceeding our threshold. To be at 4%, not to exceed threshold, we are $11 away from that threshold. So if we were to choose a not to exceed threshold, knowing the numbers today, we're within $11 of that threshold, and I'm not comfortable at that number.
And it's also important to remember too, because Lisa, when we were sitting, she had her spreadsheet up with me, that LTWADM, as that number, which is our weighted student count, as that number in her spreadsheet goes up, that cost per student comes down. So we estimate, depending on where we end up with our, with the Agency of Education diversion, it's going to be somewhere between those two numbers, as long as they go up from where they are, which they should. So that's the number as of today, but it's still a very fuzzy number until we get better, better weighted averages. And it also changes with the yield.
That's key. Remember, 2 years ago, the yield was, going back and forth, and it ended up being 10. But so let's, it's a very low yield. But again, the problem was the pressure of that $119 million that was put into the budget. So, I'm sorry to bring such bad news. So anyway, just the last slide is just the cost drivers. Next slide, I'm sorry. The cost drivers, these are the things that we need to be addressing. And we also, I should have put health and care on here, but these cost drivers need to be, addressed. They're not being addressed. These are major cost drivers in our budget year over year. And we, over the last 3 years, we've been slashing our budgets, and there is nothing left to cut. We are at bare bones.
And that's the challenge, and those of us, many of the board is counted in that, who have really taken a deep dive into education policy and the current narrative, especially with the December 1st tax letter that the governor came out and said, this is why we need larger districts, which would still be 4 years away, would not change budgets between now and then. And it's predicated, and this was a comment from the newspaper. His comment was, we need bigger districts in order to have, in order so that those bigger boards would cut staff and close buildings. So anything you do is still, you have a bigger district, and we know what it's like going even from a supervisory union to a school district. I was not here at the time, but I've heard many stories that it takes a lot of time to transition. Even with that case, it would be, 5 to 10 years. And that's why Lisa's point and our continual point on cost drivers, when you look at healthcare costs and the way that has ballooned out of control, they're the areas that we feel should really be areas that our state is looking for. But I don't think we can look to the state for answers. I think we're going to have to come up with a lot of those answers ourselves. Yep.
Lisa. So it says a shift in mental health care spending. Do you mean mental and healthcare spending? Because I always see healthcare up there as one of the cost drivers, and it's not listed. That's okay. And I can understand for sure that there's way more things related to mental health happening in the schools. But what are those things? Like, what are those costs? I mean, social workers, go ahead.
There's a whole host of costs that are interventionists. There's a whole host of costs that's looking to include, and we've went over this when we had John here and went over that, and we can bring John back. But there are, you know, evaluation costs. There's OT costs, even not just special ed costs. There's speech costs. There's all these. One of the things that we've introduced was the Rivers program, so that's an added cost. Yeah, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head all the different costs, but we can pull that information together. But that's the pressure, because it's a very gray area right now. So all those costs are coming out of the school districts rather than the Department of Health.
Now, some of those costs, like the OT, PT, they're traditionally school-based costs for special needs students. When Lisa's talking about the mental health piece as well, she's talking about those costs from Washington County Mental Health, Green Mountain Behavioral Health. They are costs that in other states are borne and controlled through your mental health agency. In Vermont, they are, in many cases, those costs are pushed off to school districts.
And being in an IEP.
Completely separate.
Oh.
In most cases, students who have those services have an IEP, but they're not necessarily the same, but there's a crossover with those services.
Education, because in my mind that would have been special education, and I wouldn't have appreciated that there was a separation. And so I'm trying to understand what these costs were. It wasn't computed.
Very good questions.
Increased guidance counseling.
Related to IEP services. Not necessarily extra. It's part of their duties, but a lot of those duties overlap with the work of those mental health services. And that's a piece too that, as we were working with the state last year, that they have a hard time, because one of the challenges is the way that they have the chart of accounts that Lisa knows far more about than I do. But for example, when we went to some listening sessions from the agency with the secretary last year, they were trying to get a handle on send us what those costs are. But the way that the state and the agency has the chart of accounts connected, they are all in the same category. So we are paying for Washington County Green Mountain services that are coded the exact same as school psychologists. And a school psychologist in this district, they are all contracted services, but they are not. It's not a psychologist who's sitting down providing mental health needs for students. It's a person who's doing the mandatory educational evaluations for the children. So, but they're all commingled. So the state has a hard time breaking out what actually is mental health pieces and what actually is mandated educational services as part of an IEP.
I just have a question about on slide 10, you listed the salary, benefits, and taxes in total, and it says support staff is 19.6, but a teacher's 42.6. And I understand that you did lay it out on the bottom, but what is the cost for just healthcare, the part that went up by 7%? Like, is it 19,000 for each teacher for just healthcare?
A full teacher is roughly 40. We pay 35,000 of that. So we pay 80% of that. So it depends on the salary and what healthcare. So I'm talking about the average, because we have 4 different plans.
Okay.
So depending on if it's a single family, so I pulled and just did an average of what it costs.
Oh, so it's.
And 95% of our teachers do take the gold CDHP plan.
And what is, do we know the number of what that costs per year, just the health insurance part? Did I miss it? No,
Slide 8 gives you the total, but what I can do is I can also insert in here to tell you what the costs of each plan is. So this is the total health care costs, what we budgeted for in our actual expenses dating back to fiscal year 21. So that's just healthcare. That's nothing else. That's healthcare.
I'm just trying to establish the delta between the amount that we pay for healthcare per teacher and the $1,500 we offer as a buyout, and figure out what that is per teacher. So that's sort of the number that I'm trying to establish. And then my second question is, in my research of trying to become a more educated board member, I went to the Department of Education website for Vermont about this excess spending threshold. And I believe you 100% it's 16.4, but their website doesn't have most updated information. And they said that in 21, it was 18.7. Was it 18.7 in 21?
So 2 years ago, we had a change.
Okay.
And that's when they changed the weights. And that's when the cost per pupil changed. So because we changed how we weighted students,
Okay.
it was a change. So if you were, I know you weren't here at the board at the time, but I had to do a comparison, and the other board members remember when I had to show what it looked like in fiscal year 24 versus 25 and the weight shift and how that would affect it, and the cost per pupil.
Yeah.
So there was a big change where we were down the cost per pupil, and I go back and look, but we were down, and then it changed because of the new weighted, how they did the weights.
Okay.
They calculated, and that's also the year when if you recall, where there was a cap on the budget, we could spend up to 5%, and then they revoked that ceiling. So you can't, it's not apples to apples. You can't look at it because they changed how they did the formula, the methodology to the formula.
Yeah, you gotta love these websites. They don't update them. All right, thank you.
Okay, I'm going back to the, as we move forward, the health slide for students, it says mental health. This became a real issue in the year that we were having difficulty passing the budget in terms of what that means. And now I'm a little bit confused because it sounds like how the state differentiates it. But my understanding is that because people were asking me, well, why aren't the parents responsible for paying for out of their health insurance? Why are we paying it? And my understanding is that actually those are Medicare reimbursable. They have been Medicare reimbursable expenses. So although it shows up as an expense, there's also revenue. There's a revenue side to that. Can you explain that?
There is a revenue side, and that's going to be changing too in the future. Yeah, so there is a revenue, but it's not a 1-for-1. So it is, we average in revenue for our Medicaid revenue, which is not a part of our general fund. We average roughly about, and see, this is the problem, because they're commingled, I can't isolate the costs that are associated with IEPs versus mental health. So because of the way the chart of accounts, the uniform chart of accounts is, I can't isolate that unless I look at every invoice and add up every invoice, because how they charge it, how it's put into our system. We do get Medicaid back, and on average, we get about $170,000 back a year for Medicaid reimbursements. But we spend triple that amount.
We spend triple that amount. And the other piece too that's important to remember is the Medicaid reimbursement process, and that John oversees that along with Lisa, but it's a very complex piece where there's tracking documents that staff has to do on a regular basis. There's actually a dedicated employee in central office. She's part-time, but there's a dedicated employee that it takes her, I can't remember how many hours she is, but it takes her full time just to track this to get that reimbursement. So there are costs. So there's a cost associated with just getting that money.
That's charged to the Medicaid account. So
I'm just actually sort of finding it rather eye-opening, if you will, seeing that so much of our budget is above the line budget stuff. Like that is the cost of education. And I remember seeing, a community comment somewhere being, something along the lines of, let's just get back to focusing on like education and the basics. Well, that's exactly what we're talking about right now. I mean, that is what we're doing. There's hardly anything, it's a little astonishing just to see just how much of the budget is, personnel costs, things that cannot be changed. And that it's looking like this year it's going to be even more difficult than I imagined to try to figure out how to have a budget and funding for this coming year.
Well, and I would say too that, and you can, I just read an article in the New York Times this weekend about mental health needs for students, and we are post-pandemic, and we are seeing that drastic increase in needs that they're seeing across the world and across the U.S. We are seeing that in our schools. So when we're reducing those services, general services, we are reducing it at a time when the need is greatest for students. So that's one piece. And I did want to go back to Lang's comment about cost for healthcare. It equates, when I ran some numbers this summer with Lisa, it equates to about 15% of our cost per pupil is employee healthcare. So just to give you an idea, and I shared a graphic last time that I sent out yesterday, some board members, Jonathan asked for it, that it was average costs for the ACA plans, but it translates into the costs for our own plans. Vermont's the highest healthcare cost in the country, and that has gone up drastically in the last 6 to 8 years as well. But to give you an idea, when Lisa talked about the plan that most of our employees are on, there is an 80-20 split. So the board pays 80%, the employee pays 20%. But the cost, if you have a family and you are taking the family plan, the total cost for that plan is $40,909, which is just astronomical. The district cost, 80% pay, is $32,700, and then the employee costs is yes, at least I had it up there. Yes, you're much better than I am. But that's the cost, and I sent to the board this summer an analysis. State, very good health care. We were paying, I think it was in the neighborhood of, at least I had the number up there, what we're paying. If you factor in the total cost of what my previous district is paying this year, it was within, I think, $500,000 for 3 times the number of employees, which is just astronomical. So those costs that they keep talking about at the state level, they sometimes forget that healthcare is a piece of that, and they went to the statewide healthcare to, quote, save money, and I don't think that worked out too well for us.
Numbers you're giving me now, I think I know there's some union implications when it comes to the buyout, but I think we really need to look at figuring out a buyout number to see if we can get teachers to shift to the health insurance through the person they're married to or something like that. If we're spending 15% of our costs on healthcare, and we could offer maybe $10,000 or $15,000 to a teacher. I mean, I looked at the pay scales. That's a good amount of money. We could maybe save ourselves a significant amount of money by just getting people off our healthcare. I think we should really look at that. I mean, I think there could, but I know it's not an easy thing.
I don't know, Ashley. It sounds like you have a negotiating committee member for your next for the next round.
I did the quick math on that, and we currently had about 75 opting out and getting paid $1,500. But if you were to people making $41,000 or $60,000 could increase their pay by so much. I think it would, if it was $10,000 or $15,000 for the buyout, and we would save like a couple $1,000,000 if we could get 100 people to do it. So maybe we should work on that.
Right now, the deal is teachers opting out of healthcare worth $40,000 for $1,500. Okay.
Yeah, catching the.
It is, and first of all, I do just want to remind everyone it is a negotiated item, so this is something you could. is you would have to figure out, Lisa and I had talked about it, you would have to figure out that delta that you refer to, because if you just increase that buyout amount, even if it's a high, even, I'll pull a number out of the sky and say $10,000, if that's not enough for that person to buy onto health insurance from their spouse, then the board increases costs without a corresponding payback. So it to your point, Lang, it would be a very
and it's a negotiated plan, and it might not reduce the plan, but I'd be curious to see like how much buy-in you could get and how many teachers would come off and how much it would cost to, let's say for the sake of numbers, you have 300 people on the plan right now. If you reduce it to 275, how much savings would there be? And can we recoup at least 50% of that savings by doing these buyouts or something?
I mean, obviously this is something that has to be negotiated and we're not deciding this here, but I'd be very concerned if we're, start talking about reducing healthcare benefits to save money. What would that do to our existing teacher pool? And would we actually also be risking the loss of teachers? Because if you're not getting benefits,
The people we would be, that would be voluntary, and people would be doing it because their spouse had good enough insurance that it was worth doing. It's not for everyone, and people would not jump onto that immediately. And it would be voluntary. So
it's a mandated cost. We can't, people have to do that on a voluntary basis, and I don't think you would have a large number of people doing it just because of, healthcare in Vermont is expensive no matter what. And individual have to look at the level of benefit, what it would cost for them to buy onto another plan. There's a lot of complexities to it. Is it worth a discussion with the association? I think absolutely, but I think it would have to be done, in a cooperative way, and there'd have to be a lot of fact finding done to see what that number would be. I think it's a great idea, but it's not a given.
Right off the top, I can see an equity issue with that. If you're not married and you don't have the option to try to figure out how to earn another 30 grand. But aside from that, I just wanted to ask, so if 72%, called 73% of the budget is salary and benefits, and the rest is operations, how does that compare to other districts?
It is right in line. Other districts actually have higher salary, wages, and benefits. So, for instance, I know Mansfield is at 80%. So,
So first, I think we shouldn't shoot the messenger on this one. I mean, these are terrible numbers, but they are what they are. I did want to ask on the slide 7 about the budget assumptions. Some of the increases are huge, as we knew they would be, health and dental insurance. Some of them are kind of in line with cost of living, utilities, phones, things like that. I haven't seen a big jump in the insurance before. Is that a new feature this year?
oh, we had a big jump last year as well because of the floods. So, and we're paying for, if you recall, we're paying for an extra policy on Moortown because of the floods. So there's an extra $20,000 policy that we're also paying for Moortown. So we, if you recall, National Flood Insurance was added to Moortown.
So does the big increase not work out to a big number?
This is a projection, but it's probably, I'm trying to remember. I think it's about 102. I have to double check, but I think it's roughly around 100,000.
Increase.
That's actually a very good point. It's just not property insurance, it's all our insurances. So that's talking workers' comp, cyber insurance, board insurance, all of those insurances add up. I mean, I have a long list of different policies.
I'm really just asking and thinking out of the box. But although it would seem unrealistic to get people to buy, to opt out of the health insurance program, the assumption being they could have a spouse that would help them. But what about the idea that maybe it's happened before, maybe they have to pay a higher share of the health insurance for some kind of increase in salary, but not to equal, I mean, as a negotiation strategy. And we're in a 3-year contract now, right? I think so. We have 2 more years on this contract. But just wondering, yeah, okay. Just wondering if, I mean, I was a teacher. I know that I had to have the insurance because my husband was self-employed. There wasn't a big policy that I could join in. So I would have always taken the what was offered, and it's a wonderful benefit. And that's what that's why even if salaries are not commensurate with some of the higher salaries in the state, if you have a good health insurance package, it's, a big benefit. Anyway, so I'm not advocating, but I'm just wondering if maybe making that an option, that across the board you have to pay a higher percentage.
That is an interesting question. I mean, it's a lot of little bites. We could get some, if we can get some gain, some ground in different ways in that would be one of them. Go ahead, Ben.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the 80-20 split is actually a statewide thing. Is that true? So we can't really nip from the edges on that. But I do know, just to Rebecca's point about sort of the selective unfairness, it actually gets much deeper than you think, because if you're actually a teacher and you're married to a teacher, you can't get the buyout. And if you're a teacher married to an administrator, you can't get the buyout. It's only, and this is true, if you're a teacher married to a superintendent, that's the exception to the rule. But that's the only exception to the rule, is if a superintendent is married to somebody and actually that includes even people who work in state offices. So if you're a teacher married to somebody who works in the state government, you can't get the buyout. So it's crazy. But all of those things were put into place. I think it's discriminatory because then they're telling you actually who you can marry in that particular case, and that's kind of nuts. But I think it's crazy that no one's even challenged it in court yet. But there you go.
That's state law.
I think Ashley mentioned it, but we do have 78 staff members taking cash in lieu. We do have 78 staff members taking cash in lieu.
How many staff members are there? Just curiosity.
All told, roughly 372 heads. Full and part-time, because you can't, if you're counting part-time FTE, sometimes I have a 0.9 FTE or a 0.5 FTE, but I have 372 head count.
So 372 people are eligible for health insurance. Yeah, I mean, I know what you said.
No,
So it's
you have to be a 0.8 or more to be eligible for health insurance. And not some part-time people, if they're below 0.8, they're not eligible for health insurance.
So back of the napkin, it's closer to 350 people of the 372.
Yes, probably.
So 73 of 300. So we already have close to a little over 25% of people are not taking the health insurance. So, it'd be interesting to look at it. There are a lot of factors associated with it, but it'd be just an interesting thing to look at since it's such a cost driver.
It's mostly teachers.
Yeah.
Support staff do not. We only have a few support staff.
Looking at the weights for the formerly referred to as free and reduced lunch kids, those kids aren't being counted as much. And so are we doing something in the school? They're trying to figure out what that number is?
And so the problem is we're having trouble getting those forms filled out because it's all free. So why do I need to fill it out? So we are working on trying to get those numbers and get those forms filled out and then get those numbers, even though we know the number that we had last year, it significantly dropped this year. It's not accurate. So we're doing a deep dive and trying to get those numbers up.
They're the only number that's the they do Joy to the Seasons in the Valley. I don't know, just kind of brainstorming. This is a random idea, but it is a program, water, right? Where the different nonprofit organizations for boys, an option might be to work with some of those folks with these forms and connect.
Well, I mean, Joy of the Season is done by the church, right? And us, community fund. I mean,
Funds,
yeah,
probably.
yeah. There's a privacy issue there, isn't there?
Well, it would be voluntary. It's voluntary to get the coupons, and it'd be voluntary for any organization to participate. But it seems like that would be a way to get the forms.
Dan has a question or 10. Go ahead, Dan.
What do you want out of us tonight? Are we trying to narrow down those? Yes, we're trying to narrow it down. Okay.
That's
So-
what I need to. I need to know what I need to be able to then to come back with that. So then you can see like large category, I know you want to then do a deep dive in terms of large categories. What is direct instruction costing us? What is transportation costing us? What is athletics? I know that's going to be the next role. And to be able to do that, I need to be able to know what's the target.
I mean, if it's that time, then I would just suggest maybe the two on the end, the level funded and the level service, are probably off the board for various reasons. And we focus on COLA and the threshold.
Jonathan, go ahead.
Thanks, Ashley. I think it would be very helpful, Lisa, if we could see. I know this has come up in the past. I remember it being asked for 2 years ago. Like literally a list of, hey, these are the things that we are doing and spending money on that are not absolutely required by law. Take all the stuff that we have no say over and just don't even bother showing us that. Show us what is in our budget right now that doesn't absolutely legally have to be there. And until we see that, I don't know that any of us can make any kind of informed decision as to what level of spending we should try to go for, because I personally don't even know what the slop is. Like what amount of money do we have to cut from our existing budget that isn't absolutely required by law? And until I knew that, I can't really tell you what I'd like to do, because I don't know if it's even possible. So I really think we need to see that list that you just mentioned, the things that are out there that are currently costing us money that are elective. And I don't know what that is. I know sports aren't mandated by law. I know that music isn't those things. I don't want to cut any of them, but obviously we're going to be making cuts. And so the next step for us, or at least for me anyway, is to know what can be cut. And until I can see a list of all the possibilities of what can be cut and what, if we cut every one of them, what would that do? And then hopefully not cut all of them, but make some informed decisions out of that list as to what we would agree should be cut next. It's ugly. It's horrible. No one wants to do it, but until we know that, I don't know what we're even really talking about. It's all just notional. And until we can get a sense of the actual, where the rubber hits the road, what we can change, we're just talking in platitudes right now. Of course, nobody wants to cut anything. And it sure looks like we're going to be making cuts. So I don't even think we need to talk about anything other than what are the things we can cut. Once we know that, then I think we can have a meaningful discussion. Until then, it's meaningless in a way.
Well, okay, thank you, Jonathan. I mean, transportation isn't mandated. How much is that? 3 million, something like that. Honest, I mean that the cut and driedness of what's mandated and what isn't. Mike has left the table at the moment because he's AAA guys here, but there's a lot in there. I mean, and a lot of that is not necessarily within our purview, but I hear you. Thank you. Go ahead, Emily.
Well, while I understand and respect Jonathan's comments, I feel like when you're talking about cutting things that are not mandated by law, you're talking about cutting what makes a school a school. And I think that is a detrimental concept to the students and the community.
Then Steve.
I'd just like to remind everybody that on the board, one of the things that we do, right, is we hire a superintendent to make those decisions with their administrators about exactly how to make those cuts in the least restrictive way to run the school district. We decide as a school board how to direct the school district in terms of what recommendation to make for how many FTEs to cut in terms of like what budget to go forward with. And then we put that up to the, which is a bet. And we're putting that up to the voters to decide. And they either agree with us or they say no and disagree with us, and we go back to the drawing board. But we never look at who's cuttable and who's not. And we don't micromanage that aspect of it. So we don't have to worry about that end of things because we have some very capable, very educated and very skilled and certified people that help us run the school district for us, so that we don't do that for them. And I just want to remind everybody about our responsibilities on the board versus theirs. So
I just have one last thing to say. Well, probably not. Anyway, just as another thing to throw out there when we're talking about things that, are not required by law. I don't think nurses are required by law in a school. And we had some very conversations at the last meeting about how hard it was to realize the effect that it had on the students and support staff and staff members for areas where we cut nurses. So, I mean, these are difficult things, but there's a lot of things that are not required that, again, make our schools and serve a need that the community needs to have access to.
I just want to reiterate that I'm against any cuts, but I don't think we're going to have a choice, which is why I'm suggesting that we need to be realistic and understand that we cannot cut legally required things. We will only be allowed to cut not legally required things. So therefore, I think it would be helpful to know what those are in order for us to make a good decision.
I very much like Dan's suggestion that we narrow down Lisa's work to these middle two options, not exceeding spending threshold and aligning with cost of living increase. So do we need a motion on that or just a sense of the board?
I think that's probably pretty sound. What is preventing us from, besides extra work for you, for splitting the baby between a 2.8 and 4% increase? Is there anything?
Everyone get that? Maybe a middle ground?
Is there anything preventing us? We're looking at COLA and then the threshold. We got a 2.8 and 4% increase. Was there anything preventing us from looking at splitting those two numbers? Maybe it's a 3.5% increase.
And I do want to point out at 4%, we're $11 away from the threshold.
If we wind up getting a change with AOE on the V5 instead of V1, does that make a significant change in the level service line? What? Come down? What do you mean?
Number is better than your first number from your letter.
Even if we have our LTW ADM adjusted, it would I have to go back and think when I did this. It would have to be the exact same as the current year to change, to not to do exceed. I mean, we still, even if I plug it back in, I have so many spreadsheets up, I don't know. We still would be exceeding the threshold at level service with that same number.
In that case.
Eve, then Bobby, then Lang.
So it sounds like Lisa quite reasonably really doesn't want to do the 4.0% increase budget. So maybe we should do the 2.8 and then the casual, what was it? 3.75.
From the threshold. Yeah. Got it. Bobby, then Lang.
And the only reason why I'm saying that is $11 is very close with uncertainty and the yield. So I will keep everybody up to date on the LTW ADM. I hope it goes up. I plan on it going up, but it would have to go up significantly.
Right now, and in class size, which I list of druthers, but seriously thinking about it, if it came to cutting positions, half or whatever.
So hold on. So I only used in my presentation FTEs. We would be looking at everything. So, it's just, I only presented that because that's the big nut. 73% of our budget is wages, and benefits, but we would be looking at everything. And whatever number you give me tonight, we go back with the administration and we come back with how we could do that. And it's not just FTEs, it's, you know, increase class sizes, looking at everything, overturning every stone. But there will be, structural changes. And, we would come back with whatever we need to do to get to that number. It's not just FTEs.
My question seems, I just wanted to, just from my understanding, basically, so what you're asking us tonight is to give you a number to shoot for. Like you have a budget, like sort of built, but you're trying to figure out where things need to go. So you're looking for us to say, like, if we said make the budget 51 million on the nose, which would be like probably close to his number, like you would just build a budget based on that number and present it to us, and then we would look at it. Is that what it really comes down to?
Let's say we split it with, say, 3.5%. I look at that number and then I work with the administration and say, okay, what can we do to be able to achieve this cut? And whether it be FTEs, which is going to be very difficult, or we look at class sizes, we look at, different what ifs. This is what we're going to come to be able to meet that number. And that's what we would work with, and then bring it back to the board and present, here are the different ideas.
I understand that $11 below the limit you're not comfortable with, but what is the number that you are comfortable with below that limit? Is it $50? Like where are we at with that?
I can have a better answer once I'm comfortable with my LTW ADMs by V5, but I'm not comfortable with $11. I would be more comfortable if it's like 200. Yeah, 400 and something we were. So, I mean, I'd be more comfortable with that, especially not knowing, because we have a cushion, not knowing what the yield is going to be. So, I mean, could the yield go down? I hope not. This current year's yield is 8,596. Right now, they're projecting next year's at 8,849. Do I want it to go up? Yes. The higher the yield, the better for us. But once I have a better number for the LTW ADMs, I would definitely say at least more than 200, for a cushion, because you never know where that yield is going to work, what it's going to happen with the yield.
So if we were to say, because when this information is coming, it's not necessarily coming very quickly. I know we're in the beginning part of our budget season, but if we were to say something like, build us a budget with a $250 cushion, like, would that be a fair ask? I mean, because it seems like it's hard. Things are constantly changing. Letters are coming out. Like, is that a better number to ask than to ask for a hard number, a 3.8% increase, or is it a $250 cushion from that max number? Would that make sense? That's what you do here.
It was from the corner of the table over here, from Dan and Bobby from the last meeting of, what happens. I can't remember the exact phrase, but we loved it. What happens if we have a fire? Right? That was basically the analogy, the house is on fire analogy. But what we were talking about doing even before our meeting and kind of going over the numbers the last 2 days is coming back with lists of services, what this means moving forward for our community. I think our community needs to know, this is not the first year we're going to see this. So what does this mean? We have not just in our district, but we are used to in Vermont, very good services. And unless there is some other quick solution that starts to chip away at some of our mandated expenses, we're into a couple of years of this. We knew this, Lisa and our predecessors told us that this was coming, and this timing is here. So we need to make sure that people know not just what this number would be for this budget, but what are those pieces moving forward that, um, that are areas, because the changes we made to our buildings, particularly um, our elementary schools this year, um, we can't make significant cuts to those buildings moving forward where we have done in the past. That's going to require more structural changes. So we'll come back to you over the next two meetings with some more details, but we are going to make that list even longer of what happens, what happens if that budget wouldn't pass, what would happen next, what would happen next year, what would happen the following year. And I think we just need to be transparent with that piece for our community.
Strong believer that if we come up with a budget that makes sense and we do we engage the public and we educate people and get people to the polls to pass that budget, we can make anything happen. And my concern is that we're going to cut too much because we think we know what the public wants. When I'm realizing that the state with this excess spending threshold, they're really laying the gauntlet down. They're saying this is as much money as you can spend for pupils. So it's not based on what the town wants or the valley wants or whatever. It's based on what the state says. So if we gave you a number that was a number below that excess spending threshold to come back to us with, and then we brought that out to the public with a good public, talking to people, getting people out so they understand what we're doing, that's a budget we could pass. Maybe. I don't know. I'm new here. So I've got, it's all sunshine to me. But I think to me that makes the most sense is to base it off the excess spending threshold, not on any sort of anything else. I mean, that's what the state says we can spend, or we pay this scary $2 for $1 thing that I don't truly understand the tax, but I'm sure that's a whole nother algorithm that I don't want to know that.
I would like to call the straw poll if we could. Okay.
Are we going with Lang's 250 below the threshold? Or are we going to do a percentage? Or are we going to do multiples of those? Where did we end up here? Exactly, because that changed it a little. We can have more than one scenario.
I liked the JB scenario, splitting it between here at 3.7. I don't think that is quite right.
Joking. Oh, well, this is not a jokey spot. This is so not jokey. I think two numbers. So not to the difference between, is there a big difference between $250 below the spending cap and a 3.4% increase? $3.4.
Just lets her like real time adjust where it's, you come to the meeting and you get that number. Whereas a percentage is just, it's a set number. I'll stop talking now.
We have two scenarios to be more. Go with the scenario that's less cuts.
To look at our options we're at the option looking time. So
50 is basically the most we can spend on education based on the state, right? So that would be your max budget, because that's what Lisa's 250 is the number you're comfortable with.
Dan?
I would submit that it's a little bit arbitrary, although I like the thought process. And I know Lisa's worried at $11 right now, the way it worked out. But also, it's not a hard cap. We could theoretically decide, okay, we can cut it close. And if we get this tax penalty, maybe we're okay with it, right? Maybe we have justification for taking a small tax penalty. So I don't know that we need to trim it down to one at this point. And I think we would stick with the two that Lisa has on her presentation, the COLA and the threshold. And then it's only the first week of December. So we come back in a few weeks and maybe at that point we narrow it down to some number in between those if it's appropriate.
Thoughts on that? Let's straw poll for that. That's kind of where we began. Steve, go ahead.
I guess I don't see the point of asking Lisa to prepare a 4% budget when she's very unhappy with it. So I'd be happier with the 3.4 and the 2.8% options. And those do work out to, I guess, essentially close to Lang's proposal.
Okay, we got that. Okay, if you like that, which is 3.4 and 2.8 scenarios, raise your hand.
I'm raising my hand on Zoom.
That's minus Dan. That flies. All right, let's do that. Okay, thank you. Thanks, everyone. That was good. We need to, and Lang, we want you to talk. That's why you're here. We don't stipend you for nothing.
And I do want to remind the board that the January board meeting calendar, we always list 3 dates for meetings. Last year, we only canceled the 3rd one, but we do 21 and then 28 if needed. It may be a year where the board decides you need that 3rd meeting. So just want to put that on everyone's radar, and just to ask Lisa too to make sure that I'm not sure. I think you counted the dates of if we passed it on the 28th that we would have enough to legally have it warned in time for the. We do. Okay. We would have to warn it by the 29th. So that means the 28th that the board approved it on the 28th. That would be very close. Yeah.
Hey, we're kind of ahead of schedule. Does anybody have any more questions or is dying to talk about budget some more? Not quite. Okay, thank you, Lisa. That was really helpful. And no, we all knew it wasn't going to be good news, so no worries. We'll carry on. All right. We have that we've just done it all.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
We
So
weren't sure when we put the agenda. We didn't
Yeah.
have all this information.
right. All right. Well, that means we are winding down and we have a consent agenda to approve. That includes the meeting minutes from 11/19. That we did it. I mean, that's what we just did. That was they just added that detail in there based on that we were going to talk more about the numbers.
That conversation was going to, when we planned the agenda 2 weeks ago, that conversation was going to be more hypothetical until we got the letter Friday and Lisa ran the numbers and we reviewed them over the last 2 days. So it was that. Oh,
That one's not working. Bobby used Lang's. Yeah.
Committee report, because we talked about that synthesized list and whether how whether that's a public list or what to do with that.
I can talk a little bit about it. I mean, the document that Mike prepared for the last meeting, Mike and ChatGPT, is a public document. And we were discussing in the outreach committee to what extent we want to call the community's attention to it. And I think we do. There are a bunch of outreach committee issues that we want to hit on over the next several weeks. Of course, we want to hit on the budget, but it's too early to do that since we don't know what we're talking about yet. I'll just briefly report also that as a result of the survey, about 160 people said they wanted to be on an email list to keep in touch with board activities. So we're about to launch that. We're just fine tuning the initial greeting email. So maybe that's good for now. Is that good for you, Bobby?
Thank you for that little update. Okay. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Steve. So if people want to be on the mail list, what would it look like if this is even possible to just have a a board update on the district email and add people to the district email list.
District email, like school district email list?
Well,
Can't really,
these things are always a little tricky. So we had on the survey a question, do you want to be on an email list to discuss issues? And not discuss issues, but to just be informed of school board issues, because we can't discuss issues on an email list. So, because we violate open meeting laws.
Updated what the board's doing, having them have the whole picture of what the school district in general is doing might be an opportunity, but I was misunderstanding.
Honestly, now I don't quite understand what distinction you're making.
So what you said, people want to be on the email list. To do what?
Just to be kept in the loop about school board or state educational issues.
And I was just suggesting that they be part of the school district email list, because then they see everything that's happening with all of the schools, et cetera, and we make our list larger, and then we're automatically getting that many more people, that much more information. And so it would look like if that happens quarterly or monthly, maybe at the bottom, update from the board. It feels like that would accomplish the goal. But you did not ask for my input, so take that.
I mean, it's an interesting idea. We'd have to see how it would work. These things are always more complicated than you would think.
Everything works in systems. So the way it works with Steve's list is our School Messenger is our app that we use, our system that we use to send out email updates. So it's coded by building, and also like when I sent out an update yesterday for the weather related closure, that goes to all buildings. So what we had to do for Steve, because you can't just create a group list in an email, and you can do that, but when you're looking at 180 some emails, you really have to use a rapid notification system. So with Steve's 187 names, we were able to create a custom list, a separate custom list within School Messenger. So when Steve wants to send something out, here's an update on communications committee. He'll send that to Shannon. Shannon will send that to those 187 people. They'll receive it. So other kinds of updates, if you're talking about school updates, we send on a regular basis. Every single school sends updates from that School Messenger list. And it can be their newsletter. It can be, don't forget, next Wednesday's ski day. So we don't add people to every single school list, or else you would be inundated with, I don't know, dozens of emails all week. So that's why we have a very specific kind of list that we manage and then we send out, and we also have to be careful of certain privacy pieces as well. So we have an IT person who works with that system and helps us create those lists. The newsletter that we send out is sent to every district resident, and then my newsletter we also publish on Front Porch Forum. So we get more widespread publication on that.
The information that you're talking about, we could be doing something in the newsletter. I just was at a meeting with all the communications people around us anyway. And that was one of the things we were talking about, was how to get stuff out to communities. But the newsletter, it seems to me, I was thinking that we should even ask Shannon to include a short paragraph from the board or something, a board section in that. We have a board section on the website, so encouraging people to go to use that. The website is really terrific. I've been spending a lot more time on it lately. And
anyone, if the board wants
Cindy.
a monthly article, when I send out my newsletter, Shannon, it comes out through Shannon's name, but it's the superintendent's newsletter. I am happy to include, I include school updates. So all you have to do is get it to me. We generally send it out first Monday of the month. So if I have something by that,
off, but Cindy, what you just suggested is exactly what I was suggesting. And I understand that there are systems, and because there are multiple systems, there is a lot of different information around, and you're probably getting great at the website because you're using it so often. So people that engage with the school not as often as you struggle with the website. So we have a kind of a communication issue. And so when you said that, I was like, oh, this is just another way to kind of pull things together. This is obviously another topic, and we all just thought we were getting out of here earlier, but it's something on my mind a lot about our communication.
For caring about that. And everything.
Is this a good time to say that I would like the emails and text messages to stop? Please stop.
They're
No,
never
it's a bad
stopping.
time. Okay.
Okay. Do we feel we've exhausted all these topics? Okay, so we're going to do this consent agenda. We are going to approve the meetings from 11/19/2025, and we are going to approve a board warrant that doesn't have a number. Lisa, do you have the number? Oh, good, because we don't have it in the, okay. God, Corey, you've been it's just been endless with you tonight. Good Lord. Let someone else have a minute. 760.
62, 671.47. That's what you just said.
Lang, please read out the number that's on the warrants. Thank you. May I have a motion to pass the consent agenda? From JB, a second, please. From Dan, all those in favor say aye. Aye. I am looking for one more motion. Second, please. From Emily, a second. First from JB, all those in favor say aye. Thanks, everybody.